out the bottom line. Harrison's Reality Check.
And it is the top of the hour. Cary Harrison with you. Welcome. Happy Tuesday, unless you're listening on a Friday or a Sunday, as people do when things are rendered into podcasts. Later on down the road, who knows what has happened, as always. That's why I just want to bring you up to speed on where we're, teetering on the high dive of hideosity right now. And either way it goes, it's not going to get better within the next couple of days, that's for sure. We're going to be talking in a few minutes with Professor Emeritus of International Law at Ohio State University, John Quigley. His books include The Ruses for War, American Interventionism Since World War II. We're going to talk about Ukraine, this thing that is ubiquitous in all newscasts, in all conversations. And you're wondering, gee, we act like we own it. Well, you're going to have to find out why that is the case. But let's start off by reminding you, you can get a free newsletter, my free newsletter, simply by going to goharrison.com, goharrison.com, one word. Free newsletter you're going to be able to get and hear and see things that you would not be able, or shall we say allowed, to hear on radio. Back in the 1980s, you would. I know it's weird. Like back then you could do a lot of stuff on the air. But the conservatives that took over in many, many years punished the people who had more progressive or liberal concepts and fined them for fart noises or anything, which used to be perfectly commonplace once upon a time. In fact, as you know, the great, who am I thinking of? I'll think of his name in a minute, but he ended up going to the Supreme Court, or the case went to the Supreme Court on one of our sister stations in New York for the alleged 7 dirty words. And there aren't actually 7 dirty words. And the Supreme Court decided that contemporary community standards were the definition. But people like Howard Stern, who is no great liberal bastion of anything, but he happens to be, more of a First Amendment kind of guy. And because of him not supporting John McCain back in the day, everything he said was finable. So much so at $750,000 under the Bush administration and swinging Dick Cheney and all the other folks that he ended up having to leave FM radio altogether and took a gig for only $400 million a year at Sirius XM and no longer had FCC worries. We have FCC worries, you and me, right here, right now. So we're not allowed to do a lot, which is why you want to go to goharrison.com, get my free newsletter, and you're going to get all the cool stuff that we don't dare do here. Now, there is a guy who universally can do and say on any platform, never a problem, because he's what we call adult supervision, the grown-up in the room. He has got well-refined manners. He's got dendrites and synapses that fire in beautiful rhythms. He's an investigative reporter. He's a talent beyond what Zeus would see when looking at Ganymede or any of his millions of children, and we still don't know who they all are. And that, of course, is none other than Greg Palast, who we're going to do an update to our fact injection of last week. We talked about Ukraine. We talked about oil. I know. Isn't it funny? Every time everyone invades, usually there's minerals, natural resources, and oil somewhere in there, which is why we haven't invaded, say, well, I don't know. Where haven't we invaded? That's probably another question for another show. Let's say hi to Greg Palast. And last week's fact check was on the Ukraine. You made a prediction, Greg Palast.
Yes.
Do we send you the banana curve to the right because you got it right, or do we send you the banana curve left because you got it wrong?
Well, I didn't slip on this banana this time. So, in fact, we got it right. What I said was that we are likely to see that Russia will take back Russia, that is the Donbass, Crimean area. And that's what Putin has said he's going to do, go into the back into the Donbass where he was in 2014. And again, I just got off the phone, by the way, with Ukraine, with our we have two people. How is Ukraine? We have two correspondents there, and once again, they're saying they're in the west of the country right now, and they're saying that the American hysteria that this is going to lead to a mass full-scale invasion in World War III. I mean, again, I hate to make another prediction, but that it will go. It'll stay within the Donbass region. So I got it right, and therefore, in return for getting it right, my prize will be to give you, the listener, $500. And what do I mean by that? I mean, right now, KPFK is in its fund drive, and by the way, I think it's misnamed. It should be Fund Drive, F-U-N, because we have so much fun.
Well, it is when we're on.
when we're on, and when we're off, it's what can I tell you? Anyway, the Fund Drive, I really am the Greg Palast. I will be putting up a $500 matching grant. You got to call in, or even better, go to kpfk.org and say, hey, yeah, I like the Palast fact injection. I like the reality check because I like facts, whether injected or not, and we do like reality. So that's why I want you to make this contribution right now by going to kpfk.org. That's kpfk.org. And there's some great premiums there, but whatever you put up within this hour of reality check, I will match up to $500. And you can also call 818-935-5735 or 818-935-KPFK. It's just easier to go to the website, kpfk.org.
Yeah, definitely so. And by the way, you'll be able to see the video of this because we video cast this, not live at the moment. We had a little glitch in the control room, but I, like Thomas Edison, have come up with a beautiful workaround that I know my friend D'Angelo is going to be thrilled about, where we can still use the Zoom platform, but add, oh my God, is it going to look good for next week? You can go to the KPFK website, same one where you're going to make the donation, where Greg Palast has a $500 matching grant out of his own personal wallet because he loves this show, Harrison's Reality Check, and we love you, the audience. So he's ponying up $500,000 out of his own wallet to match whatever you throw in at kpfk.org. You can go there and you'll see a video of this broadcast sometime later tonight, or certainly by tomorrow. Thank you for doing that, Greg, because it matters in public radio, which has a long history of supporting independent, critical thought. And speaking of critical thought or critical race theory, critical as in criticizing other races, I suppose, you're on a winning streak here. So what are the facts, Palast?
Okay, I want to take on this issue of critical race theory. Now, supposedly, the right wing has gone after this this theory that racism infects the entire body politic and just about everything from ordering pizza to trying to vote. Well, I want to object because critical race theory ain't a theory. It's fact. So I want to talk about the fact injection is to say, let's start calling this critical race fact. And I just have two examples to show you what I mean. You can ask me.
Okay. I was just
what's number one?
On
all right, if you're not curious, I'm off.
Getting wound up.
I'm taking back my $500, man. Okay.
What's your first example of critical race fact?
Not
Mr.
theory.
Palast.
It ain't theory.
Yeah.
It certainly ain't theory to Jevin Lamar. Jevin Lamar, by the way, is the assistant producer at the Palast Investigative Fund, a great hip hop artist. And to pick up some extra bucks, he was a bouncer at my favorite local in LA, Johnny's Bar in Highland Park. And he was bouncing one day, that is manning security. He's wearing a security uniform. It says security in like 7-inch letters on his shirt, front and back. A guy comes in, drops a gun on the floor. So he calls the cops, as he's required to do, and reports, as he's required to do. Middle-aged white, and this is important, middle-aged white male has just dropped a gun out of his pocket. So the cops show up in a couple minutes, guns drawn. This is like wide Earp. And they immediately point their guns right at Jevin's head. Now, take a guess. Jevin Lamar is an African-American male. So he's he's young African-American male. He's reported a middle-aged white guy with a gun. They point guns at his head, get on the floor, mother, etc. With their guns at his head. And then he says, actually, I'm security. I'm security. I'm the guy that called you. That's the guy with the gun. I said, oh, okay. They didn't apologize or anything. But this is what I'm saying. We start out, there was the assumption by the LA cops. And by the way, this is not Rome, Georgia, the center of the Ku Klux Klan. This is cool, hip, Highland Park, Los Angeles.
Wait a minute. I found the flaw in all of this, and I'm going to share it with you, Greg Palast. The flaw is you assume that the LAPD can read. Security has how many letters in it?
Right. Okay.
I mean, these are the same
right.
people who used to club Soviet Jews that had emigrated here. The gays had to start a whole city called West Hollywood because of the LAPD. It may as well be Rome, Georgia, in many ways.
But this is the point. In other words, and so we have it. So it's not a critical race theory. For Jevin Lamar with a gun at his head, it was critical race fact. And there's one other story. Go ahead, ask.
Can you do it in 2.5 minutes?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. To understand why critical race theory is critical race fact, has been with us a long time. But we have to go back 2,500 years to a guy named Plato. And Plato dropped dead. He ran a place called the Academy. He was considered the greatest philosopher of the time and maybe of all time. Number 2 philosopher of all time, and certainly the number 2 honcho at the Academy in Greece, was a guy named Aristotle. And so it was assumed, and Aristotle assumed, well, I'm going to take over when Plato bites it, I'll get the gig. But they said, forget it, Ari. That's what they used to call Aristotle, I think.
Only his friends.
Only his friends, and several of his enemies, because they then said, no, forget it, Ari. You're not Greek. You're Macedonian. And the hell if we're going to give this hot spot to a Massey, right? So it's not critical. This has been endemic, what Freud called the vanity of small differences. Our racial prejudice, our racial lens through which we bend everything has been with humanity for the last, say, 3.7 million years. Our next guest is probably an expert on this, correct me, but about 3.7 million years since we have made distinctions based on skin color, race, accent, religion, length of toenails, etc. So it's not a theory. It's a fact, and we need to know the facts. And that's my fact injection for the day.
Oh, well,
and by the way,
yes.
One more thing, KPFK.
Yes. Wait,
I got this. Take my money, please. Go to kpfk.org. I will match your donation. Please make it now. kpfk.org. I'll match up to $500. So put up your 500, make me pay, and put up another 500 for your matching fund. This is Greg Palast saying go to kpfk.org and support radio for we the people.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg Palast. That is the Greg Palast Fact Injection. You can follow him and any of his stories on any time, anywhere, at any occasion at gregpalast.com for the latest in what's going on. In just a moment, we're going to talk to Professor Emeritus John Quigley of International Law at Ohio State University. His books include The Ruses for War, American Interventionism Since World War II. He dealt with the Crimea issue following the breakup of the USSR at the request of the Department of State. That would be the U.S. Department of State, which was working through the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe on this very subject. He's written about it for the Cambridge Journal of International and Comparative Law. So you're going to want to know what there is to know about this. As we pause for a quick second, I'm going to hand it over to D'Angelo Jones. Back in a flash.
Flashpoints is now airing on KPFK weekday afternoons at 5 p.m. Some of the guests you'll hear on Pacifica's award-winning current affairs show are Oliver Stone, Noam Chomsky, Tom Hartman, John Pilger, and the world's top journalists. If you like Democracy Now!, chances are really good that you're going to enjoy Flashpoints. You're invited to tune in 5 p.m. Monday through Friday right here at KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles or online at kpfk.org.
Harrison's Reality Check. GoHarrison.com.
And it is 16 minutes past the hour. Cary Harrison with you. Don't forget, you can get our free newsletter simply by going to GoHarrison.com. One word, GoHarrison.com. You're going to get videos. You're going to get stories. You're going to get audio that you would not be allowed to listen to on FCC-regulated FM radio. That is not to say you're not getting the gold, the manna, the best stuff here. You are. But there's, let's just say, stuff that the after show and the afterglow. So you want to make sure you join up, and it costs nothing. And we don't sell your email address, my favorite part. You can also follow us anywhere universally at GoHarrison, at GoHarrison. I mentioned a minute ago, Professor John Quigley, Professor Emeritus of International Law at Ohio State University. Last June, he was featured on accuracy.org news release. Accuracy.org, try saying that 10 times quickly, Dr. Quigley. And that is probably the go-to source for much of the deep dig information that we're able to get to today. And he had written and released a warning called NATO trying to use cyber attacks to trigger Article 5. You're wondering, what is Article 5? What does that have to do with anything? But you've heard them mention it on CNN without explaining it. But it seems to be the linchpin, the keystone to this entire Ukraine, Crimea, Putin, all the good, clean fun and mayhem that's happening right now. Professor John Quigley, I want to welcome you to Harrison's Reality Check.
Thank you.
And thank you for your unbelievable patience. We're glad to have you here. So let's jump right into it and talk about Article 5, which seems to be the excuse to do whatever.
Yeah, Article 5 is the article in the treaty that sets up the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, dating from, 1949. And it's the article that says that if one of the NATO countries is attacked, it will be considered an attack on all of them. So it makes the NATO treaty what we call a mutual defense treaty, that all of the states that are members of this group, they all agree that if any of them is attacked, they will consider it an attack on themselves and they will respond accordingly.
So that opens up the first question, which is, to whom does Ukraine belong? And is it not sort of a neutral zone between Russia and the West, NATO? So it's kind of this dead zone.
Well, it's not a member of NATO, so it doesn't come within what I was just explaining. Yes, it's a state unto itself. I mean, it's not connected in any formal way with Russia or with anyone else.
And it is its own entity. So back in 1990, if I recall historically correctly, and do guide and steer me where I'm wrong here, but there was some utterance made by the U.S. that we would not push to have Ukraine ever join NATO, that if Mr. Gorbachev took down the wall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we would allow Ukraine to be Ukraine and leave it alone and not force it, push it, invite it, tease it into NATO. Something like that?
Yes, not only something, quite exactly like that. It was in the context of the discussion about the reunification of Germany, and that was of some concern to Russia. And the discussion was that if the Western countries, in effect, let's say West Germany, were to retake the eastern part of Germany and reunify Germany, that would not be any a threat to Russia or to anyone, but that the West would not push to have its own defensive shield move into Eastern Europe, because a reunification of Germany would have meant that, well, that the reunified Germany would be part of NATO. And so this was Jim Baker, who was the Secretary of State of the United States at the time, had discussions with Mr. Gorbachev. And the discussion was along the lines that the Western countries would not push eastward.
Cary Harrison with you. We're talking to John Quigley, Professor Emeritus of International Law at Ohio State University, an expert on Crimea and that particular region. We're talking about Article 5, which says that if what happens to one happens to all within the world of NATO, the ecosystem of NATO, and the United States seems to be the principal voice of NATO, certainly has been since day one. And the United States, among, I guess with the backing of other NATO members, said that no matter what, we would leave the Ukraine alone and not do anything. And now, boy, are we interested. You point out, Professor Quigley, when you were dealing with the Crimea issue following the breakup of Russia, or USSR that is, soon to be possibly that again, if Mr. Putin has his way, my opinion. Knowing a few people over there, they maybe don't think it's such a bad idea, or maybe they've been told to think that. Nonetheless, it looks like the idea of cyber warfare, which is now the rinse and repeat over and over again pretext for doing anything, is cyber attacks, cyber attacks, cyber attacks. How real is that?
Well, it's certainly true that with cyber warfare, you can cause a huge amount of damage to another country. But that's what makes it so tricky as a legal matter. If you begin to say a cyber attack is tantamount to a full-scale invasion, with ground troops, well, that means that you have the right of self-defense against it. So you can say, if we were subjected to a cyber attack, we can respond. And self-defense is a very tricky issue because if you expand the circumstances in which one can use force in self-defense, you more or less erode the prohibition against aggression. Because one side can say, well, the other side did something to us, therefore we can go in to their territory.
So, Professor John Quigley, if the U.S. and Israel conduct a cyber attack against Iran, does it have the right to defend itself, or do only white people on this side of the Atlantic Ocean have that right?
Well, in principle, if you were to follow this theory, it would mean, yes, that Iran would have the right to respond in kind. I mean, but I think that's why it's important that this theory not be expanded too broadly.
So what's the solution here as we all sit in front of our TV sets, reading our newspapers, looking at our phones, constant updates, the world is ending, the stock market is imploding left and right in front of us. Does it look like NATO is going to do something like jump in? It's already supplying weapons and other things. The AR-47s or whatever they are, the assault rifles, the same ones that famously are used to shoot up schoolyards here in the United States, are plentiful all across Ukraine. So there's a proxy war actually happening as we speak. Is that a sufficient enough war to do whatever it's supposed to do? Maybe the better question is, what is the end game or the plot of this play for both sides, if we know?
Well, it's not clear, I think, at this point, what the Western countries are going to do. I think Russia has perhaps played its cards rather well by letting the West think there's going to be some huge invasion, and then doing no more than recognizing the independence of these two small regions in the eastern part of the country. And that puts the West in a rather awkward position now. I mean, do they engage in huge sanctions because of that? Even though that's something that you can rather readily rationalize on the grounds of self-determination. That is, if these regions are not happy about being part of Ukraine and they want to be on their own, who is to say that they cannot? I mean, we do have that principle in the law of self-determination.
Yeah, that's definitely one of our superstar uniquely American products, the right to self-determination. So I think it's the fact that Putin declared that they have that right that makes it look as though he decided, and it is now the way it is. And I think that makes a difference to the American ear, because we're not being presented with that they want anything. It's these people are suffering, which they are. The United States is there to protect. The Russians want to go in and bust it up. It's interesting because Russia is using somewhat the same argument that the Germans used in World War II about ethnic, if there were such thing as an ethnic German or a Aryan German in Czechoslovakia being molested and abused by the people in Czechoslovakia at the time. So the Germans had to go in and rescue their own people from obvious potential annihilation. And so here we had the England at the time hand over Czechoslovakia. And so Vladimir Putin saying pretty much the same thing, that the Russians, the ethnic Russians, are being slaughtered left and right. So he has no choice but to move in and protect. And so it becomes this weird chess game between the U.S. and them. But the U.S. said it wasn't going to get involved, and it's getting involved. And I think that's the part that most people don't know.
Yes, I think most of the public in the United States does not have the benefit of hearing your Greg Palast and his analysis of what's going on in eastern Ukraine, so that they don't understand that this area does have a serious question with regard to self-determination and denial of self-determination. All we've heard about over the last week is, when will Putin invade Russia? That's all the press can talk about. And they haven't talked about the underlying issues.
Well, I appreciate it. One final question. Would you be able to augur some kind of outcome here, just having dealt as you have with such good scrutiny on the former USSR, on current Russia, on Crimea, having seen what these trends, how they tend to play out? Would you have a sense of where this thing goes?
My guess, and I've been wrong before on international issues of this kind, my guess is that this is what the Russian government is planning to do, and that it's going to sit and see what happens, and that we're not going to have any major military action. I mean, the separatist groups in Lugansk and Donetsk are capable of fending off the Ukrainian army at this point. They don't really need a huge number of new forces coming in from Russia. So my guess is that not very much more is going to happen over the coming days.
Well, I appreciate your time. We've been talking to John Quigley, Professor Emeritus of International Law at Ohio State University. His books include The Ruses for War, American Interventionism Since World War II. He dealt with the Crimea issue following the breakup of the USSR at the request of the U.S. Department of State. which is working through the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe on that subject. And he's written about it for the Cambridge Journal of International and Comparative Law. Professor Quigley, do you have a website or a place other than me listing some of your books where we can go and follow you?
I'm on the website of my university. You can find me there.
All right. And that would be Ohio State University. We'll make sure we get that in that free newsletter when you go to goharrison.com and put in a transcript of this conversation as well so that you can have a chance to read it. I do appreciate your coming on, and thank you for your expertise, Professor John Quigley.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cary Harrison with you. This is Harrison's Reality Check. Coming up in a minute, I'm going to open the phones, and we're going to talk about getting stiffed for work performed. It's a big normal deal in LA. It's now a big normal deal in other places, apparently. But are the people who do that to you, who have worked legitimately, are they somehow reasonably able to defend themselves, or are they just thieves? I want your opinion on that. You can give me a buzz, of course, at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, and I will tell you my particular story in just a tick.
Preventing truth decay. Truth decay.
Cary Harrison. Reality Check. Live.
GoHarrison.com.
Welcome, comrades, to Moscow McDonald's. I'm Boris. And I'm Boris. Now that Glasnost has gone poo-poo, the big boss don't fool around. Give you new Mickey G's Fun Meal. For just 1 month's wages, you get 2 fries. That's right, 2 stringy little fries. You also get shake. Right, KGB agents shake you, strip search you, and take away your cigarettes. Just be glad they don't kick you in McNuggets. And for dessert, you get half-rolled toilet paper. Eat it, use it, your choice. Big Fun Meal at Mickey G's. Remember, no shoes, no shirt, no Poles, no Lithuanian, no Latvians, no Estonians. No.
Listen, while it's still legal.
Cary Harrison. Reality Check. Live.
Do you want to keep your loved ones from using drugs but aren't sure how? It's simple. Talk to them.
Son, your mom and I are going out. Yeah? And where are you going?
To a party.
And who's going to be there? Just a few friends. Yeah, that's it, friends. Do I know these friends?
Well.
Talk to your parents about drugs. You have more influence than you know. Plus, they'll listen.
Now, I trust you won't be doing anything you shouldn't be doing at this party. No, of course not. No. Good. I'll be waiting up for you.
You will?
When your parents were teenagers, their parents never talked openly to them about drugs. So it's up to you.
Have a good time.
Well, we would have.
What a drag.
Please, talk to your parents about drugs. Children, the anti-drug.
GoHarrison.com. Harrison's Reality Check.
Cary Harrison.
And it is 34 minutes past the hour. Cary Harrison with you, reminding you to get the free newsletter at goharrison.com. Where you're going to get the unexpurgated, uncensored, unfettered, unvarnished version of things. Simply are too delicate to say right here, right now. You can also follow me on any social media platform at GoHarrison. Back with Greg Palast right now because he has made this matching pledge, which makes him more than a hero. $500. So you put in whatever, he's matching that up to $500. Why? Because he likes Harrison's Reality Check. And therefore, if you like syllogisms, if P then Q, therefore we like him too. And it rhymes, so it must be true. Greg, we are giving a shout out, a nod, asking people to simply go to kpfk.org, make a little click, make a little donation, support the station, support this show, and support what we're doing together. And you have shown up, opened your wallet, the Greg Palast wallet, the portmanteau, the billfold of Greg, or the BOG, the bog. You've opened up the bog and you've plucked $500. Wow. And I believe you're muted, my friend. And now you're unmuted. And now you're almost unmuted. There we go. Nope. Almost.
No.
There.
How about that? Okay.
Yes.
All right. You can't mute me for long, you know. Would you
I didn't do it.
Please tell Dick Cheney to stop messing with my mute button. Okay. But anyway, yeah, no, I did dig into my kids' wallets, their 529 education accounts. They're smart enough. But anyway, $500, 500 big or small, to bribe you to join me in making a donation to this extraordinary thing, KPFK. Go to kpfk.org. And if you're really wise and want to get wiser, you can make $100 donation and get a copy of Tom Hartman's Hidden History of Big Brother. It's a $100 donation. And here's what's cool about it. No, you can't get it on Amazon for $9. You can't get it in a bookstore. Tom Hartman has made this book available only to KPFK listeners a month before it will be publicly released. We've got the books in hand now. So please go to kpfk.org and look for the Hartman book, make that $100 donation, and through the magic of my matching grant, it'll be $200. So please go to kpfk.org or just make that donation. Whether you want to read Hartman or not, there we go.
Wow, that is so cool of Tom to do that. So I can see you're flipping through it, and it is a meaty tome. And somehow Tom can write 48 books a year, do 68 shows and TV, and go sailing. I want to be him when I grow up.
I know you. You wonder. Actually, I understand he's actually 4 people on his home planet. That's how he gets this all done.
Mormon?
Okay.
Yes. All right.
Please,
Enough of that.
kpfk.org or 818-985-5735. You can also use that number to call in and give us your views. Whether we listen or not, I'll leave that up to Cary Harrison.
Well, that's actually the call-in number, because I don't think that's the donation number for today, but I do know for a fact that kpfk.org is the place to go right now. And Greg Palast has suited up and shown up in ways, well, they're miraculous, because you did the same thing last week as well.
Yes.
And I have to say, ain't other shows where that's happening like that. So if you make a donation at kpfk.org, Greg is matching that out of his own wallet because he cares very much about free speech and about the research that he does, the stuff that he provides. And you just heard the wild encomium. I mean, the lofty, over-the-top compliment that Professor John Quigley of Ohio State University gave to Greg Palast and said, if only the general public heard what this man had to say, it would be different. Well, you are part of that elite group of listeners here, and that is why Greg is supporting it this way. Go to kpfk.org, click, Greg makes a matching donation up to $500. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for supporting this show, and thank me for having you on and being smart enough to do that.
Okay. In fact, I'm going to send you my hat.
Yes.
You get to wear my hat. That's the other thing. If anyone matches my $500 matching grant, I will let you wear my hat. It was worn by Hugo Chavez, by Willie Nelson, and that's Willie saying he doesn't want to wear my hat anymore. But anyway, okay. So all I want to tell you is go to kpfk.org. This is your station. Greg Palast reporting.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg Palast. You can go to gregpalast.com to find